What's up, everybody? Pastor Matt here. Thanks for checking into the YouTube channel. Happy Saturday to you, by the way, Saturday morning. Got good news for you. Tomorrow is the Lord's Day. Tomorrow we'll be gathering together again in the name of Christ to worship and to give thanks and praise to our great King who brings us grace, mercy, and peace. But not everybody seems to be experiencing grace, mercy, and peace these days. Of course, I'm referring to the death of the Queen, who recently passed away just this week, an epochal moment, no doubt, for the entire world, in which her death seems to mark kind of a great transition period, thinking back to her 70 years of reigning on the throne. The number of, man, the world has just totally changed. And it's hard to even believe that the first prime minister during her rule was Winston Churchill. So many changes, so much technological change, so much change in the world. And everybody seems to have one unified thought related to her passing, and that is that she was, by all accounts, a great and wonderful, gracious, kind, and benevolent leader. If the world had so many kind and benevolent and gracious leaders as the Queen, may she rest in peace, the world would certainly be a better place, in my personal opinion. But not everybody is expressing their gratitude and thankfulness for Her Majesty's life. In fact, we have here in front of us, sharing the screen here, a tweet from Uju Anya, who is apparently an advocate of critical race theory. And she tweeted this a couple of days ago. I heard the chief monarch of a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating. Hard to imagine a colder, more sinister, dark, malevolent sentiment to be experiencing at the death of anybody, whether it's one's enemy or one's friend or one's family or an acquaintance or even somebody you've never even heard of before, perhaps some stranger in a foreign land on a different continent. But to wish that somebody's death, the very hours of their passing from this world into the next, would be excruciating. My goodness, it's just such a sinister thought. It's hard to even wrap your mind around the fact that there's some people out there whose hearts are this cold that they would even think that, much less to actually express it to the world, to actually desire to tweet that out. Of course, what we have here, I think, is a manifestation of the kind of hatred that critical race theory does seem to cause to well up into the hearts of very resentful and bitter and quite sad people. Honestly, somebody like this should know better than to express this out to the world. You can see here that this particular tweet of hers got over 24,000 comments, over 22,000 retweets. Apparently 47,000 people hearted the tweet, which I suppose to take to be some kind of sentiment of agreement with her, which to me just boggles the mind and really is kind of depressing to think that there are people that are so hateful out there like this. You know, I did a whole series of lectures on critical race theory several months ago now, and one of the things that I warned about is this kind of Neomarxism, this kind of race hatred stirring movement really has nothing good for the world. It is a movement, it is an ideology that is essentially based in bitterness, resentment, fear, hatred, racism even. It's claims to be a movement that is anti-racist at its core, but fighting fire with fire, it only seems to cause more hatred and dissension. My goodness, what a movement, huh? It certainly seems clear to me that critical race theory has nothing good for this world, certainly for this nation, in as much as it has no ability to bring about healing or peace, but only stokes these kinds of very base, very dark fires of just animosity from one human being to another, from one kind to another, from one nation to another, from one race to another. It does not speak a word of healing and grace and peace at all. No mercy, no forgiveness. Now, what's interesting about this this particular tweet right here is that this individual here, Uju Anya, she's a professor, and notice the fields of her expertise here: applied linguistics, anti-racist, feminist research. She has the LGBTQ plus flags here. a movement that kind of bases itself around the idea that love is their motto, and yet we certainly don't see much love in this particular expression. Her research is in the field of language, learning, and teaching. Blackness and multiculturalism, all views are mine. Well, they're certainly not mine, and hopefully not the views of Carnegie Mellon, where she teaches. It does make me wonder, for this kind of movement, which seems to specialize in the area of sensitivity training, trying to train people to be sensitive to the needs and the feelings and the value of other human beings, whether or not this movement needs to be resensitized itself. I do wonder what the faculty meetings are going to look like at Carnegie Mellon on Monday. Are there going to be any faculty meetings? Is this going to be addressed at all? Certainly, this is a deeply, deeply embarrassing moment for Carnegie Mellon, which is otherwise a highly respected university, specializing in a lot of technical fields related to the STEM areas of science and technology. And my goodness, I mean, what a black eye to the institution as a whole. I can't help but wonder what the higher ups are going to think about for something like this. Does it represent the institution as a whole? Does it represent the faculty? Does it represent the views of other professors? If I was a parent, if my student was going to this particular institution, I would be seriously furious about this as some kind of a statement. This seems to tarnish everything else that the university stands for. Now, let me just clarify here for just a moment that I am not in favor of cancel culture. In fact, I do believe that professors should have full academic freedom to express their views. I really have very little positive to say about the kind of cancel culture phenomenon that's taking place across universities, where professors are being squeezed out of positions. Mostly, though, it's conservative professors being squeezed out of their roles, threatened to toe the party line, threatened to advocate for Marxism and communism and all these other kind of isms that just seem to be so dark and disparaging of all other people, other their kinds, seem to have very little to say by the way of actual peace and reconciliation. So there's that. So I'm not in favor of cancel culture necessarily, but my goodness, when you say the quiet part out loud, it just kind of exposes what's really at the heart of the movement. And I've expressed these concerns in various formats, especially in my lectures on critical race theory and Marxism. I do recommend that you check out those lectures. I think it'll help you to understand the basic foundational presuppositions of this movement and why it is so filled with hatred and disparagement for other peoples, other kinds, other races, other subgroups. It's just a movement that has very, very, very little ability to speak anything of good to the human race as a whole. Contrast that with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, one of the things that these progressives, these neo-Marxists will tell you is that Christianity is a movement of hate. They'll tell you that because we have moral standards. We have moral standards related to human sexuality and gender, for instance. But have you ever heard anybody speak like this? I mean, let's just go back to the tweet here for just a moment and consider it again. Do you ever hear Christians say things like this, that we hope somebody's death and pain would be excruciating? No. What we're talking about when we talk about grace, mercy, and peace is that people would come to find their sins forgiven in Jesus Christ. That they would hear the good news of a God who loves the world so much that he actually sent his son, not to condemn the world, but to save the world through his own suffering, his own blood shedding, his own martyrdom. It's Christ who died for us. And the whole purpose of the death of Jesus Christ is not so that we would inflict the worst of desires upon others, especially in the moments of their greatest weakness and their death, but rather that we would come to have our own sins forgiven, that we would come to him by way of repentance and faith, and that we would find peace and reconciliation with others. This is why, for instance, in the prophets, Isaiah and Malachi talk about this idea that we would take our swords and beat them into plowshares. Think for a moment about that image. To take your sword, which is your animosity, your violence, your hatred, your despairing, your your fury against everyone else and against God. That sword, which stands for a symbol of violence and hatred and warfare, bloodshedding. But what the gospel does is it beats our swords and turns them into a plowshare. And a plow, of course, is symbolic of productivity and harvest and thankfulness and gratitude and providing for others in need. And so, when you hold up critical race theory in one hand and you hold up the gospel of grace and peace through Jesus Christ on the other hand, it just becomes so obvious that the one is greater than the other. Listen, critical race theory has nothing good to bring about unity, reconciliation, and peace in this world. It only has this kind of hate-filled sentiment. And to that degree, I can only thank Uju Anya for expressing the very heart of the movement as clearly as possible. Sometimes you just have to let people talk. You just have to let people talk, and you can hear what's in their heart. And unfortunately, this heart seems to be filled with a lot of resentments and agony. Hope that she would come to find grace, mercy, and peace through Jesus Christ. Well, thank you so much for checking into this short video. I do love you lots. I'll talk to you later.